Imagine trying to remember um, the exact temperature of the chicken soup you ate for lunch on, like a random rainy Tuesday in 1987.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Right. Or try to picture the exact shade of the green sweater you were wearing that day, or, the precise feeling of the wool against your wrists.
I mean, I can barely remember what I had for breakfast today.
Exactly. For almost every human being on Earth, those details are just utterly and permanently gone. But Delia is not like almost every human being.
No, she is a fascinating exception.
She really is. Delia has a condition called Highly Superior Autobiographical Memory, or HSAM. Her mind basically holds on to the peripheral, the background, the accidental details of every single day of her life.
It's wild. She can recall that Tuesday in 1987 with the clarity of something that happened like 10 seconds ago.
Which is just staggering.
It really forces us to completely reevaluate what we think the human brain is capable of holding. We usually assume the capacity for that kind of granular recall just isn't there.
Like the hard drive just isn't big enough.
Right. But Delia's existence proves the hardware is technically capable of storing almost everything.
But here is where the story takes a really fascinating turn. At age 63, Delia is thinking back to an August 1981 family trip to Cape Cod.
Okay.
She remembers the exact angle of the late afternoon sun turning the water into this mix of gold and pewter. She remembers the coarse, gritty texture of the sand under her feet.
So far, very typical for her.
Right. But then she looks for the memory of the 90-minute drive home to a rented house in Chatham, and she finds a hole.
Oh, wow. Just a blank spot.
It is simply missing. She knows logically she was in the car, but there is this absolute terrifying absence where the memory should be.
That is so jarring for someone with her condition.
Exactly. So, okay, let's unpack this. If a woman whose brain is basically the ultimate steel trap, capturing seemingly every microsecond of existence, and can suddenly just lose 90 minutes of her life, what does that mean for the rest of us?
The rest of us who let, 99% of our days slip into oblivion?
Right. And that missing 90 minutes is the entry point into a much deeper mystery, which is the central focus of the book we are exploring in our deep dive today.
Yes, the memory of forgetting. An archaeology of what was never stored by Max and Claude. It is such an incredible text.
Our mission for this deep dive is to really explore the unremembered. We want to look at the massive volume of your life that you do not consciously store, figure out where that unarchived experience actually goes.
Because it doesn't just vanish.
Exactly. And uncover why the moments you forget might actually be the most fundamental building blocks of who you are.
I love that. And to even approach Delia's 90-minute gap, we have to start by elevating our baseline understanding of memory itself.
Because we usually think of it like a CCTV camera, right?
Right, which is completely wrong. We all generally know by now, mostly thanks to pioneers like cognitive psychologist Elizabeth Loftus, that memory is highly malleable.
It's a present tense reconstruction built from past tense fragments.
Perfectly said.
So it's not like a pristine file we're opening. It's more like a Wikipedia page that your current self is constantly editing and updating without even realizing it.
That is a perfect analogy. But the source text pushes past that established psychology to categorize 3 distinct mechanisms of forgetting.
Okay, lay them out for us.
So the second and third types are the ones we are most familiar with. There is retrieval failure, which is your classic tip-of-the-tongue phenomenon.
Like when you know the actor's name, but you just can't pull it up.
Exactly. The neurological file exists, but the pathway to access it is temporarily blocked. Then there is erasure.
Which sounds more permanent.
It is. That's the physical degradation or overwriting of synapses over time. But the first type of forgetting is the most profound, and it makes up the vast majority of our lives. They call it original non-storage.
Original non-storage. Okay, to make this concrete for you listening right now,
Yeah.
try to remember the exact physical texture of the steering wheel or like the bus pole you were holding during your commute this morning.
You physically felt it? Your nervous system definitely processed the tactile data.
But your brain actively chose not to archive it. It just flowed through your sensory net like water.
Precisely.
But wait, I have to push back a little here. If original non-storage just let 10,000 moments a day slip right through us, isn't that just a massive biological failure?
How do you mean?
Well, it's like my brain is a constantly crashing hard drive. We are walking around with this incredibly sophisticated supercomputer in our skulls, and it is constantly failing to hit save on the document.
I see why it feels that way, but consider the alternative. If you actually hit save on every single sensory input, you would be completely paralyzed.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. The extreme selectivity of memory is a feature, not a bug. It is the primary feature of human cognition. The evolutionary purpose of memory isn't to create a perfect historical museum.
So what is it doing then?
It's there to provide navigational guidance for the future.
Okay, so we have to kind of blur the specific trees to recognize the concept of a forest.
Exactly. That's precisely why original non-storage is necessary. If you remembered every single detail of every argument you've ever had with a partner, every word, every inflection, the room temperature.
That sounds like a nightmare, honestly.
It would be. You could never abstract those specific moments into the generalized wisdom of, we need to communicate better about our finances.
Because you'd be too caught up in the details.
Generalization requires the dissolution of particulars. Delia's HSM actually makes generalization incredibly difficult for her because the sheer volume of specific details just grands out the broader patterns.
Wow. Okay, which brings us to a massive puzzle. If the brain's autobiographical storytelling system is intentionally filtering out 99% of our lives through original non-storage, where does that filtered experience actually go?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because it's hard to believe all that raw data just vanishes into the void.
Well, it doesn't vanish. The unremembered leaves deep structural traces in systems that our ordinary narrative memory simply cannot read.
The text introduces these systems as the other archives, right?
Yes, the other archives. And what's fascinating here is how this applies to Delia.
This is where Delia's journey gets incredibly compelling. To understand her missing 90 minutes, she starts working with a cognitive scientist named Emil Vasquez and a somatic practitioner named James.
Right, because talk and therapy alone wasn't going to cut it.
Exactly. They use clinical hypnosis and somatic therapy to intentionally bypass her overpowering autobiographical memory. And under hypnosis, Delia suddenly recovers the exact sensory profile of her grandmother's kitchen.
Which is amazing considering she couldn't access it before.
The smell of warm bread, specific floral notes, and this very distinct chemical furniture varnish. But here's the catch. She experienced this when she was an infant, long before her brain could form narrative memories.
That demonstrates pre-autobiographical encoding perfectly. Drawing on the foundational trauma and somatic research of Bessel van der Kolk and Peter Levine, we see how the body keeps a meticulous score of its own.
The body keeps the score. I've heard that phrase.
Yes, and it's literal. Experience isn't just recorded as a story in the mind, it is metabolized by the organism.
Metabolize, that's a great word for it.
Infants experience the world and encode those experiences into emotional circuits, attachment patterns, and baseline physiological arousal states years before the storytelling system comes online. The experience literally shapes the physical architecture of the nervous system.
Okay, thinking through the mechanics of that. So what does this all mean for you and me?
How so?
Well, if the body metabolizes experience directly, without needing the narrative brain to sign off on it, does that mean our physical ailments hold our lost history? Like, say I have inexplicable chronic tension in my shoulders. Is my body remembering an event my mind completely threw away?
Exactly. That is the exact mechanism at play.
Really?
Yes, the body's archive operates entirely without words. During Delia's somatic therapy, James discovered that her chronically contracted shoulder and neck muscles were holding decades of physical vigilance.
Just bracing herself.
Bracing for the constant, unwanted intrusion of her own vivid memories. Her mind told a very coherent story. She was fine, she was functioning, she had this remarkable cognitive gift.
But her body told a different story.
A completely contradictory narrative of deep exhaustion and grief. The experience of being overwhelmed was fully stored, just not as a cognitive story.
We are essentially walking around as living, breathing archives of things we don't even know we know.
It's quite profound when you really think about it.
Our posture, our nervous system triggers, our gut reactions, they were all sculpted by the unremembered. But let's push this even further.
Okay, let's do it.
We've established that highly emotional or stressful unremembered moments live in the somatic tissue of the body. But what about the truly unstored neutral moments? The background ambient light in the room right now, or the breath you took 5 minutes ago that didn't trigger an emotional circuit?
To answer what happens to the truly ephemeral moments, the text zooms way out to the fundamental physics of forgetting.
Oh, we're getting into physics now.
Yes, specifically Landauer's principle, proposed by physicist Rolf Landauer in 1961, It deals with the thermodynamics of computation.
Thermodynamics. Okay, stay with me here.
It's brilliant, I promise. Landauer proved that any logically irreversible manipulation of information like erasing a bit of data must release a tiny amount of heat, which increases the entropy of the universe.
Wait, so information isn't just abstract math. It is physical. It has a thermodynamic weight.
Yes, and tying that to the second law of thermodynamics, we know the default state of the entire physical universe is a drift toward disorder, toward maximum entropy.
So the universe naturally wants to scatter things.
Exactly. The universe's baseline state is forgetting. Therefore, maintaining a memory holding specific neurological information in a highly ordered, structured state costs a massive amount of metabolic energy.
So remembering is the biological
It
anomaly.
is a localized, highly expensive rebellion against the thermodynamic grain of the cosmos.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. It's not that we're passively forgetting things because we're flawed. It's more like we are sitting in a sinking boat and the universe is the water constantly pouring in.
I love that image.
Right. Remembering is the active, exhausting process of furiously bailing water out just to keep our specific little narrative afloat against the cosmic tide. Or like the universe is constantly applying the KonMari method, clearing out clutter to reach equilibrium, and our brains are just desperately hoarding these tiny moments.
That is a much more accurate way to visualize it. You are constantly burning energy to fight the ocean.
Sounds exhausting.
It is. And if we connect this thermodynamic reality to the broader philosophical picture, we arrive at David Chalmers and the hard problem of consciousness.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, if the brain is really just a wet biological thermodynamic engine processing millions of bits of data in the dark, why is there a subjective experience of it at all? Why does it feel like something to see the color red or hear a song?
Because technically the brain could just crunch the numbers without us feeling anything.
Right. Emil Vasquez suggests a radical reframing to Delia during her therapy. What if consciousness isn't generated by the brain? What if the brain operates inside a fundamental field of consciousness?
The book uses a beautiful metaphor here, actually. The island and the ocean.
Yes, it's very poignant.
The island is the stored autobiographical self. It is the rigid structure made of all our hoarded memories, our name, our history, our grudges. But the ocean is the pure, unremembered awareness in which all experience happens.
The wave isn't creating the ocean. The wave is just a temporary, highly energetic movement of the water.
And this philosophical distinction between the island and the ocean stops being theoretical, right? It becomes deeply, painfully real for Delia at the end of her life.
It does, because eventually the biological engine can no longer sustain the energetic cost of bailing that water. Entropy catches up.
The twist in Delia's story is just stunning. The woman whose brain was the ultimate archival machine develops dementia.
It's deeply ironic.
The physical degradation of erasure begins. Her short-term memory vanishes completely. She will make a cup of tea and forget she made it 20 minutes later. But that 1981 Cape Cod trip and all the granular details of her early life remain crystal clear.
But as her island starts to physically sink back into the ocean, she doesn't panic.
She doesn't, which is so surprising.
It's a stark contrast to how other memory extremes documented in the text handle their cognitive states. Take Solomon Shereshevsky, the famous Russian mnemonist who had total synesthetic recall.
Right, he remembered everything too.
But he was completely paralyzed by particulars. He couldn't read a simple story and grasp the general meaning because every word triggered a cascade of uncontrollable sensory memories.
Or Jill Price. Right, the first person diagnosed with HSM.
Yes, she often described her condition as a nonstop, exhausting prison. Or HM, Henry Molaison, the famous neurological patient who had his hippocampus surgically removed.
HM lived in a perpetual, isolated present, but it wasn't peaceful. He lacked the capacity to transition gracefully into the present because his mechanism for updating reality was severed artificially. It was like constantly waking up from a dream in a state of mild confusion.
Exactly the distinction we need to make. Delia's mechanism of loss is different, and her reaction to it is different.
I do want to tread carefully here, though, because dementia is a brutal, terrifying reality for millions of families. The loss of a loved one's narrative history is devastating.
Absolutely.
So how can the source text frame Delia's cognitive decline as anything other than a complete tragedy?
That's a very fair question. The book does not shy away from the tragedy. It explicitly acknowledges the profound suffering, the moments of stark confusion, and the deeply painful decline Delia experiences.
Okay.
But it also points to the direct observation of Teresa, Delia's nurse at her care facility. Teresa noticed something remarkable. As Delia's rigid narrative self stripped away, what remained was not a vacant shell.
What was it?
What remained was an incredibly intense, unmediated presence. Teresa noted that Delia would look at her without the heavy filter of past history, without expectation, and without the exhausting burden of her HSAM. It was just pure, fresh awareness.
Delia had finally found the ground beneath the archive.
Yes, she stopped bailing water and finally just let the ocean hold her.
Oh, wow. That is incredibly moving. And the profound takeaway here is that you don't need to have a rare memory condition, and you certainly don't need to suffer cognitive decline to experience this kind of unmediated presence.
No, not at all.
The book explores how people across different disciplines deliberately practice forgetting every single day.
Yes, there are highly practical structural applications of these concepts. Take the Zen Buddhist practice of Shoshin, or beginner's mind.
I've heard of that. How does it tie in?
The mechanism here targets the way experts process information. When you become highly skilled at something, your brain relies heavily on stored patterns to save energy.
You go on autopilot.
Exactly. You stop actually seeing what's in front of you because your brain just pattern matches and jumps to the conclusion. The practice of beginner's mind is the intentional suspension of that automatic categorization.
It is choosing to look at a familiar problem as if you have no stored data on it whatsoever.
Right. And we see the exact same mechanism in art.
Like with Keith Jarrett, the legendary jazz pianist. The book brings up his approach to improvisational jazz. To play music that is truly improvised and alive, Jarrett has to completely release the planning self.
He can't be thinking about the next measure.
Exactly. He has to step into the unremembered, unwritten future. He lets his embodied somatic competence, all those hours of practice metabolized into his muscles, meet the open present, without forcing a pre-recorded intellectual plan onto the piano keys.
We also see this cultural embrace of the unarchived in the Japanese aesthetic of mono no aware.
Oh, with the cherry blossoms.
Yes. It translates to a deep sensitivity to ephemera. The mechanism of beauty here is inseparable from the fact that the blossoms will not last and cannot be perfectly preserved.
So if you try to hold on to it,
you ruin it. Trying to permanently archive the moment, like obsessively photographing it rather than just watching it fall, actually prevents you from fully experiencing the reality of it.
it's almost like we walk around wearing heavy VR goggles made entirely of our past experiences and our anxieties about the future.
That's a brilliant way to put it.
Every interaction is filtered through what we already know.
Hmm.
Practicing this kind of unremembering is just taking the goggles off for 5 seconds and actually looking at the room you're sitting in without needing to label it, judge it, or store it.
You allow the river of sensory experience to flow through the net without demanding that every single drop be captured, bottled, and placed on a shelf.
What a profound journey this material takes us on. We started with a missing 90-minute gap on a family road trip to Cape Cod.
We really covered some ground.
We did. We explored the hidden somatic archives locked in the physical tissue of our muscles, zoomed out to the sheer thermodynamic physics of entropy and the energetic cost of memory, and ultimately arrived at the intense, pure presence found when the autobiographical self begins to dissolve.
And that brings the lens directly back to the person listening to this right now.
Exactly, because the vast majority of your experience of this very deep dive will likely flow right through you.
It's true.
In a week, you probably won't remember the name Rolf Landauer or the specific details of Delia's grandmother's kitchen. It will become part of your unremembered. And the text argues that this is perfectly okay. Experience does not need to be archived in a permanent steel trap to be real.
It is real right now in the flowing of your attention.
But that does raise one final, crucial question. What do we leave behind if we don't hold on to our specific moments, and if history doesn't hold on to us?
The book introduces one last concept to answer this, and it's called the trophic cascade.
The trophic cascade. Tell us about that.
So, in ecology, when wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone National Park, their mere presence subtly altered the grazing patterns of the elk.
Right, the elk moved away from the rivers.
Exactly. And that behavioral shift allowed native vegetation to grow back along the riverbanks, which stabilized the soil, which literally reshaped the physical flow of the rivers.
So the rivers have no memory of the wolves, but their entire shape is dictated by them.
Exactly. And your existence operates the exact same way. You reshape the world in ways you will never consciously remember, and that history will never record.
Just by being here.
Right.
Huh.
A random smile you gave a stressed cashier, a subtle shift in mood you brought into a tense meeting, an idea you casually passed on to a friend. These actions propagate through the culture and the ecosystem completely anonymously.
You will eventually be forgotten by the grand narrative of history.
But you will persist in the unremembered structural tissue of everything that comes after you.
You are an active participant in the trophic cascade of humanity. So as we wrap up today's deep dive, we invite you to just sit for a second. Drop the VR goggles of your past. Feel the physical weight of your body resting in your chair. Listen to the ambient, unrecorded sounds in your room and exist just for a moment in the pure, unremembered present. Because even if that 90-minute drive is missing from the archive, you still made the journey.
And the ocean is still there.